For those joining, we'll be starting in a minute. We're just waiting for the audience to join in. So I'll ask for your brief patience. Ten more seconds. Another 10 more, if it's okay. We still have people joining in, so our apologies, as the system is taking the time to allow everybody in. It keeps going up. Okay. I believe we will start. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you to this United Nations observance of the International Day of Family Remittances that acknowledge the tremendous yet silent contribution by millions of migrants to their families back home. I am Pedro de Vasconcelos, manager of the financing facility for remittances here at the International Fund for Agriculture Development, or IFAD. 8 years ago, during the 4th edition of the Global Forum on Remittances, Investment and Development held in Bangkok, over 300 stakeholders from the remittances community made a call to the creation of a day that could make justice to the true nature of family remittances in low and middle income countries. But behind this request was the fact that remittances represented much more than their tremendous aggregated flows, but that they also represent lifelines for millions of families, and this would also sustain and improve their lives. As a special agency of the United Nations, IFAD responded to the call, and in 2015, the 176 member states composing its governing council unanimously proclaimed 16 June as the International Day of Family Remittances. This proclamation also called upon the United Nations General Assembly to formally adopt this day, and so thanks to 41 sponsored countries behind the resolution, on 12 June 2018, the IDFR was unanimously adopted by the General Assembly. During this last year's celebration, we exchanged on the potential impact that the pandemic was having on the flow of remittances. Since then, a lot has been learned, and we are now provided with refutable evidence on the true nature of these flows and what they mean for millions. Ladies and gentlemen, to kickstart these proceedings, it is my honor to introduce you to Maaike van Ginneken. She's the Associate Vice President, Strategy and Knowledge Department of the International Fund for Agriculture Development, who will chair this first part of this observance today. So without further ado, dear Maaike, I would like to invite you to take the floor and share your remarks.
Thank you very much, Pedro. Excellencies, distinguished representatives, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening across the world. And let me start by wishing you a happy International Day of Family Remittances. That's what we're celebrating today. As Pedro already indicated, every 16th of June, we recognize the important contribution of 1 billion people directly impacted by remittances, either as senders or as recipients of remittances. In 2020, the total volume of migrant remittances sent to low and middle income countries amounted to $540 billion US dollars. $540 billion US dollars. Behind these figures lay billions of untold stories of family support. In many ways, there's 2 billion untold stories here, one for each of the 2 billion individual transactions of about $200 at a time. Each of those small financial transactions is a lifeline for a mom, for a dad, for a sibling, a daughter, a son, or another loved one back home. And in 2020, most of those untold stories were stories of helping families to ride out the economic shock, the largest health crisis in our lifetime. This massive yet silent dedication by migrant workers to their families in the face of this pandemic illustrate that remittances truly represent the human face of globalization. If I think back about the start of this pandemic, I remember the pictures of migrants returning home as COVID struck in the first months of 2020. What would this mean for poverty, for remittances, for leaving no one behind? In the spring of 2020, the UN Secretary General issued an emergency call for action to the international community, advocating for solidarity to address what we thought was a potentially devastating impact of a substantial reduction that we thought might be 20% in remittances, a reduction that would have been equivalent to $100 billion in 2020. Looking back a year later, what we realize is that the response of the international community was unprecedented. Many vital actors pulled together to address the pressing issues facing remittances families. These critical challenges endangered the ability of these families to achieve their own daily SDGs. The challenges of poverty, hunger, and access to services. Much has been done in the past 15 months, and much has been learned during a time of rapid and dramatic change. Many of you here today were vital to the unprecedented efforts of the past 15 months. Today we celebrate you as we celebrate the International Day of Family Remittances. But let's be honest, the real heroes we celebrate are the migrant workers who continue to support their families. In the past year, we've learned that millions of remittances families and their communities not just averted the crisis of 2020, the COVID crisis, they fought back against the challenges they faced. The robust resilience, resourcefulness, and commitment of migrant workers enabled families to redouble their efforts to support their loved ones back home, while struggling in the face of the enormous challenges they faced themselves because of COVID-19. In order to maintain monthly financial lifelines, migrant workers undertook many sacrifices. Working more jobs when possible, working longer hours, depleting savings, and adopting digital means of sending money home when available. So strong is the social fabric, the social contract between migrants and their loved ones back home, that millions of families actually received the first ever remittances during this economic crisis. As a result, the volume of remittances essentially remained unchanged from the previous years, with a marginal decrease of less than 2% between 2019 and 2020. That remarkable observation that it didn't go down by 20%, but only marginally decreased, is not only a testament to the commitment of the migrant workers, it's also a testament to the force of digital transformation. The adaptation of digital technology is a major factor in supporting the ongoing flow of remittances and the growth of the flow of remittances. The rapid uptake of online and mobile channels presents the private sector with an unprecedented opportunity to develop innovative digital tools and services that foster financial inclusion for migrants and remittances receiving families. When I travel, I'm always amazed how deep into rural areas these financial services are starting to penetrate. In addition, this trend highlights the need for a more conducive enabling environment and greater investment in digital infrastructure. Let me highlight one problem that we urgently need to jointly address, which is the gender gap in financial inclusion. Today, women are 33% less likely than men to have a mobile money account. We know that women play a critical role in managing the finances of families. So we need to promote the financial participation and the status of women if we want to make sure that remittances have a maximum development impact. At IFAD, we recognize that almost half of the families receiving remittances live in rural areas of developing countries. Remittances in these rural areas probably count for the most. They not only help to reduce food insecurity and poverty, send kids to school, but also help rural people to invest in their farm or in their small enterprises beyond their farm in the food system. Achieving the potential of remittances to end poverty and hunger will require the expansion in the use of mobile accounts and leverage these resources to deliver improved livelihoods and stronger resilience to climate change and climate shocks. As I said, this will also require closing territorial and gender gaps by addressing the barriers that prevent rural people, rural men, but particularly rural women, from accessing and using mobile financial services to invest and grow their income and to reduce the cost of remittances. Last year, we acknowledged the swift responses from the international community, including several calls to action. Let me mention the call to action led jointly by Switzerland and the United Kingdom, as well as the World Bank and the Financial Action Task Force export support to several global processes, as well as the Remittances Community Task Force, the RCTF. These actions together have led to the recent menu of options for considerations of heads of states and governments of the financing for development in the era of COVID-19 and beyond, and more recently, the G20. The untold stories of remittances is now on the table of the G20, where it should be getting the attention it should get. Ladies and gentlemen, on this day, we acknowledge past achievement, but also seek to further support measures to ensure that millions or billions of families can recover, and in so doing, to help them build resilience to future shocks. 15 years ago, remittances literally were unaccounted for because migrant workers and their families didn't count in the international discourse and in government policies. The crisis we've seen in the past year demonstrates the many ways that migrant remittances, which individually are a very small amount, but collectively amount to billions of dollars, can in aggregate have a large impact on entire communities. What we've seen in the past year is a serious reminder for all nations to make remittances count more. For IFAD, enhancing our expertise in the remittances market and in contribution to rural development is a priority. It remains a priority. Through previous and ongoing projects and advocacy programs, entrusted with funds from the European Commission, Luxembourg, Spain, and Sweden, and our diverse partners, we have contributed in several key areas, such as enhancing the enabling environment for remittances transfers in numerous countries, and promoting private sector innovations that today benefit remittances senders as well as recipients. We expect that our engagement in Africa will support millions of families, and as an example, at least 1.2 million people in 3 countries of West Africa alone. IFAD's slogan, our tagline, is investing in rural people. This is why we're so devoted to remittances. We embrace remittances families as essential partners and will continue to do so in our future programs. To celebrate this important International Day, it's an honor to have key distinguished representatives joining us. And so we are honored to launch this observance with a message from Mr. Volkan Bozkır, President of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Mr. Liu Zemin, Under-Secretary General of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, better known as UNDESA, and Mr. Antonio Vitorino, Coordination of the United Nations Migration Network and Director General of the IOM, the International Organization for Migration. So without further ado, let me welcome Mr. Bozkır's message, the President of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to join this observance of the International Day of Family Remittances. I thank the organizers, IFAD, and the permanent missions of the Philippines and Guatemala to the United Nations for convening this important event. Remittances are a critical lifeline for many vulnerable people around the world. Over 200 million migrant workers today send money home to their over 800 million family members. These men and women are leaving home in search of prosperity and are doing a noble service to their families and communities by continuing to contribute despite the distance between them. This makes a significant difference in their family's life and the economy of their home countries. In some cases, remittances comprise up to 30% of GDP. This money is directly invested into food, shelter, education, and healthcare. We must be honest and acknowledge that remittances are essential as we work towards meeting the targets of the 2030 Agenda. Indeed, if we are to better understand this source of external financing for low and middle-income countries, there is a need for a better data collection on remittances. This includes data on the impact of external shocks to the flow of remittances. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on remittance flows was striking with variations across regions. Globally, low and middle-income countries received 540 billion in 2020. That's a decrease of 1.6% in the previous year. Initially, we had feared that the pandemic and related mitigation measures would have a greater impact on remittances. However, key measures reduced the impact on international migrant workers. Fiscal stimulus packages in host countries and the digitalization of money flows provided an important buffer. Migrant workers are overrepresented in sectors which were designated essential work, including agriculture, construction, and cleaning services. Many migrant workers in the healthcare sector risked their lives during the COVID-19 pandemic to keep their host communities safe. Not only did they keep their host economy running, their income provided a key safety net for their families who were also dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic back home. They are true heroes. I also commend the call to action, Remittances in Crisis, how to keep them flowing. This initiative has raised the level of awareness regarding the importance of remittances for low and middle-income countries. The call for a reduction of transfer costs and greater financial inclusion through remittances with contribution to the advancement of the Global Compact for Migration and the 2030 Agenda. This is a strong example of collective action from policymakers, regulators, and remittance service providers to benefit migrants, their families, and local communities. Ladies and gentlemen, It is imperative that we support countries in special situations. This has been a key priority of mine throughout the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I have established a board of advisors on LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS, with whom I interact regularly. I hope that you will join tomorrow's high-level meeting on middle-income countries. This will take place in the General Assembly Hall and will be streamed live on UN Web TV. This important meeting has been organized in a sequential manner with the joint thematic event on LDCs in order to galvanize this momentum and harness the support of all member states and partners to advance our shared goals. Dear colleagues, if we have learned one thing from the past year, it is that when we come together, we can overcome the most difficult, complex challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has been the greatest test for the international community in the 75-year history of the United Nations. As we seek to build a more sustainable and resilient path forward, now is the time to recommit to multilateralism, global citizenship, and solidarity. Once again, I thank you for organizing this important event, and I wish you all the best in your endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Mr. Boskier for a very passionate message, not only calling on the importance of remittances, but I think also importantly reminding us of the resilience of the multilateral system and the importance of the multilateral systems of taking joint action in this pandemic, which is not yet over around the world and which will have a very strong economic aftermath we will have to deal with as well. Let me turn to the message of Mr. Zen Min, the Under Secretary General of UNDESA.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to address you on the occasion of the International Day of Family Remittances. Today, the United Nations shines the spotlight on one of the most consequential impacts of global migration. That is, the opportunity for millions of people to improve their livelihoods through the remittances sent by family members working abroad. These person-to-person transfers help directly to lift people out of poverty. They improve their access to health, education, water, sanitation, and housing. Without a doubt, the annual flow of remittances to low and mid-income countries, estimated by the World Bank at $540 billion in 2020, makes a tremendous contribution to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. The closing of borders as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic over the past year has created hardship for migrant workers and their families. Yet, in the face of widespread unemployment, migrants have demonstrated resilience as they continue to support their families back home, often at great personal sacrifice. The pandemic has also revealed the critical role that migrants play in today's society as essential workers, in particular in the food supply chain and in the health and care industries. I encourage countries presenting their voluntary national reviews at the forthcoming high-level political forum to reflect on the role of safe, orderly, and regular migration in achieving the SDGs under review. The focus of today's campaign, recovery and resilience through digital and financial inclusion, is most welcome. While COVID-19 has accelerated the pace of digital transformation, it has also reminded us about the digital divide, exacerbating inequalities and further excluding those who are not digitally connected. At 6.4%, the transaction cost of migrant remittances still far exceed the SDG target of 3% by 2030. The deployment of the cost-saving digital means to reach financially excluded and underserved populations will help to bring down the cost of transferring remittances. Digital financial inclusion will also assist migrants and their families in making more productive use of their remittances. In accordance with Objective 20 of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, we must develop policies and regulatory environments that enable competition, regulation, and innovation while enhancing the financial inclusion of migrants and their families. Measures to combat illicit financial flows and money laundering should not impede the transfer of remittances through undue, excessive, or discriminatory policies. Today, let us celebrate the 281 million international migrants. Let us acknowledge the sacrifices they have made, and let us recognize the contribution of migration and remittances to sustainable development. I thank you.
Thank you very much to Mr. Zinmin, the Undersecretary General of UNDISA, and especially thanking him for highlighting the problem of the digital and financial divide that we still have across the world, between rich countries and low-income countries, between urban areas and cities and rural and remote areas, and between women and men. We really need to address this going forward. Of course, seeing all of you by Zoom reminds me that I hope that next year we will have a celebration of the International Day of Family Remittances in person. But I think on the topic of family remittances, it's actually very apt that we're having this event by Zoom. Think about these millions of migrant workers who haven't seen their families, who've not been able to travel, and who have at best been able to talk to their families by Zoom, and at worst by a bad telephone line. Let me turn to Mr. Vittorini, the coordination of the United Nations Migration Network and the Director General of the International Organization of Migration, for his intervention.
Excellencies, distinguished representatives, colleagues, and friends. I'm honored to provide this message to you on International Day of Family Remittances. In 2020, there were 281 million international migrants, of which an estimated 200 million migrant workers sent back 540 billion to low and middle income countries, only 1.6% lower than in 2019. During the COVID-19 pandemic, remittances to these countries continue to surpass foreign direct investment and official development assistance. Remittances form a significant percentage of the gross domestic product in some developing countries. And despite being disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, migrants made efforts and sacrifices to ensure that remittances kept reaching their loved ones back home. Remittances are a financial lifeline for countless migrant families, enabling them to pay for basic needs, invest in education, health services and housing, improve household living conditions, and reduce vulnerability of family members in times of crisis. This is yet another reminder that these funds, while private, help individuals, families, and communities to combat poverty, improve access to education and health, and achieve other sustainable development goals. But beyond these numbers are the people and the communities who generate, receive, and leverage these flows. Migrants are much more than remittance senders. They are important agents of change and development, and rights bearers. Migrants engage in labor markets, create jobs, and support the tax base as entrepreneurs. They stimulate foreign direct investment, international trade, and skills transfer. They engage in philanthropy and share ideas, knowledge, values, and cultures across boundaries. In doing so, migrants and diaspora groups contribute to their home and host communities far beyond merely financial means. This pandemic has also reminded us that migrants are often essential workers, be it in healthcare, food, systems, or logistics, and are significant members of our own communities. Yet, not only has the virus adversely affected migrant workers and their families, but also economies and livelihoods, as mobility came to a halt and jobs dried up. The pandemic has highlighted the precariousness of our collective safety and security, including financial security. As governments consider fiscal stimulus packages in recovery efforts, they must also ensure a financial, economic, and social ecosystem geared to address the needs of migrants and of their families. On the financial side, this means their inclusion in financial services, including savings accounts, insurance product mortgages, investment products, portfolio investment, and real estate purchases. On the economic side, it means enabling migrants and diaspora to contribute in commercial areas like entrepreneurship and trade. On the social side, it means ensuring decent work and doing more to include migrants in our communities, including ensuring their access to portable social protection. During COVID-19, the international community, government, and the private sector worked intensively to measure the impacts of remittance flows on development and formulate appropriate responses, including through the Remittance Community Task Force, led by the International Fund for Agricultural Development. We must continue our efforts to monitor developments related to remittances and migrants, and work together to address COVID-19's economic and social fallout to our societies, remittance, and migrants. I wish you a productive and stimulating discussion during this global forum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vittorini, the coordinator of the UN Migration Network. And thank you for celebrating migration and migrants around the world as agents of change, which have a positive impact on their host communities where they often fulfill essential services, and also have a positive income in the countries of their birth and the communities that their family still live in. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure now to give the floor to our partners and co-hosts of this observance today, the permanent representations of the Philippines at the United Nations. So let me first give the floor to the permanent representative of the Philippines, His Excellency Ambassador Enrique Manalo, who will introduce the message from the Minister. Mr. Manalo.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have the honor to introduce the pre-recorded statement of His Excellency Mr. Teodoro Locsin Jr., Secretary for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of the Philippines, on the occasion of this year's International Day of Family Remittances. Thank you.
It is my pleasure to be here today to commemorate the International Day of Family Remittances with a strong call for recovery and resilience through digital and financial inclusion. I thank our friends and partners in this endeavor, Guatemala and IFAD, as well as the Global Forum on Remittances, Investment and Development Network. The Philippines, along with Guatemala, Madagascar, and Algeria, led the adoption in 2018 of the landmark resolution declaring June 16 as the International Day of Family Remittances. The resolution recognizes the link between remittances and sustainable development and acknowledges the fundamental contribution of migrant workers to the well-being of their families and communities of origin. I introduced the resolution in the General Assembly and distinctly remember that it was adopted on 12 June, our Independence Day, a fitting tribute to the hard work and sacrifices of all overseas Filipino workers who send remittances to support their families and to create a future for their children back home. According to World Bank data, the Philippines is the fourth largest recipient of remittances globally. In 2020, remittances reached US $33.2 billion and accounted for 9.2% of the country's GDP. Our overseas workers are the gift that keeps on giving. Our advocacy in keeping the continuous flow of remittances is focused on maximizing the benefits to senders and receivers of remittances. Thus, we support initiatives that mitigate the impact of the pandemic on remittance flows, migrants, members of diaspora communities, and families, communities, and economies that rely on remittances. Last year, remittances from overseas Filipinos contracted by 0.8%. But this was good news because it proved wrong the double-digit decline forecasted in the pandemic. We expect remittances to grow by 4.0%. This is a testament to the dedication of overseas Filipinos to ensure the well-being of their families and loved ones, no matter the circumstances. It testifies to their perseverance in that goal, however bad things are. We don't have a welfare system. What we have are good, hard-working Filipinos caring for their own. Government has tried to create an enabling environment. The Digital Payments Transformation Roadmap of the Central Bank seeks to promote financial inclusion and digitized payments as mutually enabling each other. It has three features. One, digital payment streams. Two, digital finance infrastructure. And three, digital governance standards. The objectives are two: expand financial inclusion to 70% of Filipino adults and encourage innovations to improve real-time payments. In April this year, the Overseas Filipino Bank became the first branchless, digital-only bank. The Philippines is committed to improving the remittance sector. Remittances have been the lifeblood of our country. It is the most reliable source of national wealth, and it costs the country nothing but the sweat and tears of our self-driven, self-supporting Filipinos who care for their families at home. It saves the country the obligation to make sure that no one is left behind, because our people themselves make sure by their own efforts that they do not fall behind. And if by chance some of them do, well, there is the DFA to get them to safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Minister for the Philippines for illustrating how important remittances are. When these individual transactions are small, the aggregate is big. 9.2% of the GDP of the Philippines, and a contraction of less than 1% in 2020. Indeed, the migrant workers and their families are the unsung heroes, providing resilience to many communities around the world in these difficult pandemic times. The other co-host for this observance today is Guatemala, and I would like to give the floor to the Deputy Permanent Representative of the Republic of Guatemala, Mr. Oman Castañeda, for his opening statement. Mr. Castañeda, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. Good morning from New York and happy International Day of Family Remittances 2021. It is my honor to introduce on this occasion the pre-recorded statement by His Excellency, Mr. Pedro Brolo Vila, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Guatemala. Please go ahead.
Guatemala agradece al Fondo Internacional de
Guatemala would
Desarrollo
like to
Agrícola, FIDA, y a la
thank
sede
the
de las
International Fund
Naciones
for
Unidas sobre
Agricultural Development
Migración por
and
apoyar en la
the
organización
Network
de
on
esta reunión
Migration
de
for
alto nivel
supporting
sobre
the
migración y
organization of this
remesas, con un
high-level
enfoque en la
meeting on
recuperación y
migration and
resiliencia
remittances with a
mediante
focus
la
on
inclusión
recovery and
financiera y digital.
resilience through
Me
financial
complace
and digital
participar en
inclusion.
la celebración de hoy,
I'm pleased to
además,
participate in today's
porque mi
celebration,
país junto a
particularly
Argelia,
because my country, together with Algeria,
lideró los
Madagascar, and the
esfuerzos para
Philippines,
aprobar la resolución
led
de la
the
Asamblea
efforts of the
General
General
que
Assembly to
establece
approve
el
the
16 de
resolution
junio como
that
el Día
establishes the
Internacional de las Remesas
16th of
Familiares.
June as the International Day
Debido a
of
su
Family
ubicación
Remittances.
geográfica, los
Due to
flujos
its geographical
migratorios son
location,
parte de la dinámica
migration
social de nuestro
flows have always
país
been
y
part
es
of the
uno de
social
los ejes
dynamics of our
principales de
country.
la política
And
exterior
it's
de Guatemala,
one of the main
enfocado en
axes,
la
migration, one of the
atención
main axes
integral de
of
nuestros
the foreign policy
connacionales
of
en el
our country.
exterior
We
y de
focus
sus
on the
familias.
comprehensive care of our compatriots and their families
Particularmente
abroad.
durante esta etapa de
Particularly
recuperación
during the
económica frente
stage
a la
of
pandemia del
economic
COVID-19.
recovery from the
La respuesta
COVID-19 pandemic.
socioeconómica requiere
The
una
socioeconomic
disponibilidad
responses
urgente de
requires
liquidez
an
para
urgent
asegurar la
availability
continuidad del
of
debido
liquidity
funcionamiento de las
to
economías
ensure
locales
the
y de la economía
continuity of our local
nacional.
economies
Las
and of
remesas
the national
familiares
economy.
tienen un
Family
papel importante
remittances
que jugar en
have
los
a
esfuerzos de esta recuperación.
key role to play
Reconocemos
in our recovery
los vínculos
efforts.
positivos
We recognize the
que trae
positive
consigo la
relationships
migración desde
that
todos los
migration
ámbitos
creates
y principalmente
across
su
the
valiosa
board,
contribución al
and
desarrollo
above all, its
económico de todos
valuable
los países,
contribution to the
en
economic
particular
development of
para
all
el nuestro.
countries. In
Las
particular,
remesas familiares
ours.
contribuyen
Family remittances
significativamente al
contribute
desarrollo de
significantly
Guatemala,
to the
ya
development
que
of
durante el año
Guatemala.
2020
During last year,
representaron un
2020, they
14.6% de
represented
nuestro Producto Interno Bruto. Sin
14.6%
embargo,
of our
más que números,
GDP.
las remesas
But
familiares
more
son un
than
recordatorio
numbers,
del
family
fuerte vínculo
remittances
entre
are
las
a reminder of
comunidades
the
de
strong
personas
bond
migrantes en
between
los
migrant
países de
communities
origen
in countries of
y
origin
destino,
and those
con
of
innumerables
destination, the host
historias de
countries,
familias
with
que
many,
trabajan
many stories
incansablemente
of
para cuidar
families
a sus seres
who take
queridos
big
que permanecen a
risks and
distancia
who work
en
tirelessly every
lugares de
day
origen.
to care for their loved ones
Para
in the
Guatemala,
communities of origin.
es de
For
suma
Guatemala,
importancia la implementación de
the
estrategias de
implementation
educación
of financial
financiera
strategies that
que
promote
promuevan el ahorro
savings
y las inversiones productivas,
and productive
así como
investment is
un
essential,
aumento en el
as
acceso
well
a las
as
tecnologías
in
financieras.
increasing access to
Actualmente,
financial
con
technologies.
apoyo de la CEPAL, se realiza el
With the support
estudio
of the
denominado
CEPAL, we're carrying
Retos y
out a study known
oportunidades para atraer la
Challenges,
inversión de la
Opportunities to
diáspora
Attract
guatemalteca en los Estados Unidos
investment of the
hacia
Guatemalan
iniciativas
diaspora
de
in the United
desarrollo de sus
States
comunidades de origen. Con la
to
información
help
de
develop
este
the communities of
estudio,
origin. With
fortaleceremos la
information from this study,
formulación
we shall
de políticas
strengthen
públicas para un
the,
oportuno fomento de la inversión productiva y
the
financiera
drafting of
de las
public
remesas
policies
familiares que
to
envían
take
los
account of
guatemaltecos
the
en el exterior.
remittances that Guatemalans who
De
work
igual
abroad
manera,
send back home. In
Guatemala,
the same way,
con el fin de
Guatemala,
promover la educación financiera,
with a view to
mantiene una alianza
promoting financial
estratégica
education,
con
has a
Atlantis
financial,
University a través de talleres de
a
organización
strategic
financiera
alliance
dirigidos
carrying out
a la comunidad
workshops
guatemalteca
on
residente en los Estados Unidos de América.
financial education
Entendemos las
who are based
implicaciones
in
de
the
tener una
United States of
diáspora
America.
guatemalteca
And we
considerable
work with research
y la
centers to that
importancia de
extent.
sus remesas,
We understand the
señalando que tienen un
implications of having a
impacto
considerable Guatemalan
beneficioso
diaspora and the importance
especialmente
of the
agudo en las
remittances,
áreas con mayor índice de
noting they have a particularly
irregularidad.
acute
Los
beneficial
efectos de la
impact in
pandemia
rural areas
sobre la
where
seguridad
levels of poverty
alimentaria,
and
la
malnutrition are
nutrición
very
y las
high.
cuestiones conexas requiere de mayores esfuerzos que
The
propicien la
aggravated
transformación
effects of the
productiva de
pandemic
remesas
on
para que se
food
fortalezca la
security,
inversión en
nutrition, and
proyectos
related
que
issues
a la vez
require greater
den
efforts
más y
to
mejores
promote the
oportunidades
productive
para el desarrollo
transformation of
económico
remittances,
de las
to
comunidades.
strengthen investment in projects,
Es
and at the same
indispensable
time will generate
seguir
great and better
promoviendo
opportunities for
transferencias de
economic
remesas
development
más
in the communities
rápidas,
of origin.
seguras
It is
y
essential to
económicas,
continue promoting
así como
faster,
fomentar la
safer,
inclusión
and
financiera
cheaper
de las
remittance
personas
transfers
migrantes
in a more
en
efficient manner, and to
concordancia con el
promote the financial
objetivo
inclusion of
20
migrants
del Pacto
pursuant
Mundial
to
para una
Goal
migración segura,
20 of the
ordenada y
Global
regular,
Compact for Safe,
así como la
Orderly, and Regular
reducción de los
Migration,
costos de
as
transacción de las
well
remesas
as
al
cutting back
3% o menos,
the
de
remittance
conformidad
transaction
con la
cost to
Agenda
3%
2030
or
para el
less,
desarrollo
again,
sostenible.
pursuant to what is
Tenemos
laid
el
down in the
compromiso de
2030 Agenda for
mejorar
Sustainable
la
Development.
coherencia
We are
de la
committed
implementación de
to
políticas para
enhancing the
fortalecer la
coherence of
resiliencia que
global
nos permita
policies
estar
that can
preparados
strengthen
para
our
eventuales
resilience
imprevistos.
and be
En ese
prepared
sentido,
for
reiteramos nuestro
unforeseen
llamado a
crises.
visibilizar garantizar
In
la
that
paz
sense,
social,
we
que
would
vengan
like
las
to
remesas y al mismo
reiterate our
tiempo
call to
trabajar de
defend
manera
those who send
conjunta
and receive
para que
remittances
dicha
throughout the
producción
world.
de riqueza
We
sea
must
el
continue
catalizador de una
to work
economía
together
sostenible. Debemos seguir uniendo
avoid
esfuerzos
fragmenting
y
a consistent and
cohesionar
effective
una respuesta
global
multilateral consistente
multilateral
hacia los actuales
response
retos, así como hacia el
to the
futuro.
pandemic and
Muchas
the
gracias.
challenges. Thank you very much, and thank you for your attention.
Muchas gracias, señor el ministro y señor el representante permanente de la República de Guatemala. Thank you very much for your interventions. And I would like to thank all the speakers we've heard from for the inspiration. I started by saying that remittances and the migrants in this world give the human face to globalization. And I think if we've learned one thing, it is that that's true. There's billions of individual untold stories. It's a big volume of financing, and it's important for the communities we work with. Let me hand over to Pedro de Vasconcelos, the manager of the financial facility for remittances, but let me not do that before I actually acknowledge Pedro's very important contribution to the area of remittances, not only by organizing this forum, but more importantly for the work that he and his team have done in the past year as a contribution and a convener to keep the issue of remittances on the international agenda and to improve the enabling environment as well as private sector innovations to make sure that remittances can be done safely, timely, and cheaply, and the financial flows really help the communities we work in. Over to you, Pedro.
Thank you, Mikey, and thank you for your fantastic job in chairing this this first part of the observance. It's much appreciated, and I really would like to acknowledge also the colleagues from the permanent representation of the Philippines and Guatemala, with whom we have worked tirelessly in bringing this this day, this observance. It's just a small token of our recognition more than contribution to what 1 billion people are doing. So thank you so much, Mikey, for your participation. For the next part, as you can see on the agenda, we would like to have now the contributions and support from other UN member states. Many have requested the floor. There is a voting going on at the moment, so unfortunately, many member states had to respond to their UN duties. But nevertheless, we have member states that will be represented. And with this, I would like to call upon Mexico. Fernando de la Mora Salcedo is the coordinator of economic, social, and migration affairs at the permanent mission of Mexico at the United Nations, to come forward for remarks on this session. So we're trying to see if we can connect. There you go, Fernando.
Muchas gracias, querido Pedro.
Thank you very much, dear Pedro, Excellencies. I'd like to join the congratulations for all the efforts which you have carried out to ensure that this meeting be a reality. I'd like to start by thanking all the permanent missions of Guatemala and the Philippines for having organized this very, very important meeting commemorating the International Day of Family Remittances. At the beginning of the pandemic, the uncertainty of socioeconomic impacts led us to believe that there would be a decrease of up to 20% in remittances. As we have heard today, pursuant to the latest figures, updated figures from the World Bank, this drop only reached 1.6% at a global level. And here, the heroes, the unsung heroes, have been workers, men and women who are migrant workers. If we look at remittances in 2020 in Mexico, was $43 billion, an increase, a considerable increase compared to figures of 2019. This tendency continues increasing because Mexico registered a 37% annual increase in income from remittances in February of 2021. We are talking of positive trends, which represent a golden opportunity to promote the development of vulnerable communities, while migrant families use this income to strengthen their access to education, health, housing, and services in their communities. Like other countries, Mexico has also suffered the impact of the pandemic, and the government of Mexico is convinced that remittances will continue making a very important contribution to the development of local communities and will therefore help to mitigate the structural causes of migration. One of the reasons why we have seen an increase in remittance flows is due to the interconnectivity and international cooperation, actions which have been crucial in efforts to carry out massive vaccination, economic reactivation, access to employment, which have led to a greater participation of migrants in nations such as the United States, which represent 95% of the total of remittances which come from abroad to Mexico. Whereas in 2021, the Latin America and the Caribbean were one of the most dynamic regions concerning remittances. We'll see a 4.9% increase, refers to 108 billion US dollars in remittance flows. So when it comes to the celebration of this International Day of Family Remittances, and a country which depends largely on the efforts of its migrant nationals, Mexico will continue supporting migratory process and working to cut back the costs of remittances, and will continue working shoulder to shoulder with all the efforts of migrants. Thank you very much, Pedro. Thank you very much, Fernando, for your kind words.
So thank you. No, thank you again so much for the words on the contribution from Mexico, for which of course remittances represents, as well as with the Philippines, one of the biggest inflows to globally to these two countries. I would like also now to give the floor to Sweden, and in particularly for the remarks, the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, or SIDA. And I would like to bring forward, if possible, Kirsten Johnson, CISE, Head of Unit, Global Sustainable Economic Development, to address the audience. Kirsten, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all on this International Day of Family Remittances. And thank you for the kind invitation also to have the opportunity to listen to all these interesting presentations and messages. And they all highlight the important role that migrants play as agents of change for sustainable development and as drivers for innovation, as well as demonstrating the potential and capacity that remittances have to forge a path towards poverty reduction. Migrants' engagement in the development of their country of origin through financial remittances should be duly recognized and tapped into for attaining the sustainable global goals and for the reducing of poverty. As we all know, the volume of remittances far exceeds international development cooperation and constitute an important resource for development. These resources are often invested in health, education, and housing, especially when women manage the money, but also often provide the means for setting up small enterprises. Despite prediction of dramatically decreasing remittances globally, there has now been proof of the resilience of remittances, often finding new and innovative paths to reach loved ones in migrants' countries of origin. SIDA supports the aim to lower the costs of remittances by promoting competition, using new technology, and improving financial skills and access to financial services. We especially see that digital finance services represent a new approach to financial inclusion, as they give poor families access to a variety of affordable resources that make financial transactions cheaper, more secure, and transparent. Therefore, especially on this day of observance for the International Day of Family Remittances, we are happy and proud to be supporting the work of IFAD's financing facility for remittances in their drive to maximize the impact of migrant workers and diaspora remittances in order to achieve the SDGs. So thank you so much, and looking forward to listening to the remaining insightful speakers both today and tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine, for your remarks. I would like to remind also other member states representatives in the audience to come forward through the Q&A or raising their hands if they would like to contribute to this observance event. But otherwise, without further ado, I would like now to give the floor for the European Commission, and represented by Mr. Francesco Luciani, Head of Unit Migration and Forced Displacement Unit, Directorate General for International Partnership. Francesco, you have the floor.
Many thanks, Pedro, and good afternoon to everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today for the European Commission to commemorate the International Day of Family Remittances within the framework of the Global Forum on Remittances, Development and Investment. As underlined by Deputy Director General, Mr. Seychelles, during the opening of this virtual edition of the Global Forum this morning, remittances are a priority issue for the European Commission. According to last available World Bank pre-COVID data, the remittances flow from the European Union to developing countries was as high as 50 billion euro, accounting for 11% of the flows developing countries receive. The European Union is therefore the second largest remittances sender to developing countries in the world after the USA. Remittances from the European Union have a truly global outreach. The regions receiving most of remittances from the EU are Asia for the 31%, Africa 29%, other European non-EU states 21%, and Latin America 11%. Many small state economies are highly dependent on the European Union remittances. To give an example, such as states like Cabo Verde or Gambia and many others. It is estimated that the total number of people in the developing countries benefiting from the EU sent remittances reach around 105 million persons. The European Commission is committed to promote cheaper, faster, and more secure remittances to enhance the development impact of remittances in the destination as well. By meeting the Sustainable Development Goal number 10 on reducing remittances cost to 3% at the European level, Union level, migrants in the EU and their family and friends at home would save an additional 1.5 billion euros in transaction fees every year. So it's a very valuable goal that we have to work for. During COVID-19, the European Union was determined to support remittances as a key tool of solidarity with the families of migrants. Well-managed migration is a tool to accelerate response and recovery, and remittances are a key evidence of this. In the pandemic, the European Commission and its member states implemented a significant set of regulatory and projects to support the resilience of the remittances markets. They declared the remittances service as essential. They increased cross-border market transparency and supported digitalization. The European Commission also supported digitalization efforts in 14 developing countries and the National Remittances COVID-19 Task Force in 3 African countries. At the end of this pandemic, which we hope is approaching, remittance flows to low and middle income countries now surpass again the sum of foreign direct investments and official development assistance, and they are expected to increase further in 2022. Moreover, the average cost of sending money from the European Union towards developing countries decreased sharply. It is currently at its lowest value since the moment when the Sustainable Development Goals were agreed. We are now at an average of 5.86%. Globally, COVID-19 has entailed the modernization of the remittance sector towards a quick shift towards formal channels and digitalization. Timely data on flows was crucial to design measures to counter the expected fall of flows. The degree of success of national and regional measures to tackle remittances slumps depended on the accuracy and timeliness of data. Therefore, this is a very important aspect that we will have to bear in mind in this new phase, and building good data and timely data and granular data will be of essential importance. In the post-pandemic phase, the Commission is working to accelerate the digitalization of remittances, support the reduction of informal channels, and pilot investment schemes to make remittances key component for the post-COVID-19 economic recovery in developing countries. In partnership with IFAD, through our Prime Africa project, the European Commission is supporting 9 innovative business initiatives in West Africa on remittances, promoting digitalization and financial inclusion, with a series of initiatives that in the end are expected to benefit over 1 million people. In parallel, through the European Union Knowledge Center on Migration and Development, the Commission is today launching a global report mapping migrants' investment schemes throughout the world in order to facilitate the scaling up of promising initiatives to leverage migrants' financial investment potential. The expected collapse in remittances brought back global political attention to the topic and mobilized extra effort at national, regional, and multilateral level, notably at the UN level and the G20 context. The international community now has a list of tested good practices to make the remittances market more resilient, cheaper, and more inclusive. We have to use them, we have to build on them all together. In conclusion, the European Commission considers that the lesson from the COVID-19 crisis offer a unique opportunity to sketch out a new consensus on remittances actions to be undertaken to address long-standing issues in its complex environment. The pillars of this consensus could be around the following areas of work. First of all, as I was mentioning earlier, to build up, to ensure that we have better and timely data. Better meaning also not simply more reliable, but also more granular, quicker, and also including evaluation and estimation of data that are related to informal channels. Secondly, to continue the work and to get really to substantial progress in digital cross-border payment systems. This to be done increasingly at the regional level in developing countries as well, not just between the EU or and developing countries. Market transparency. This is the third key strand. Market transparency implies having an accurate, reliable information on the cost and the conditions of the transfer of the remittances. At the same time, ensuring also a fair competition between the different actors, while respecting, of course, all the security requirements. A challenge in that context will be also to ensure that as the use of the formal channels, the digital channels will increase also as a consequence of the continuous technological progress and also as a reaction of the COVID pandemic. We should ensure that indeed this digital use, increased use of remittances will use formal channels and avoid to go into the dark web also. Finally, also continue expanding the remittances use for development actions. Of course, I mean, remittances are the private ownership of migrants. The families can do and will do what they want with this money. But indeed, it will be important to give support, advice, help, and to raise awareness of the migrants and the families on the possibility and the importance to use the funds not for immediate consumption. Of course, sometimes it's not possible to go beyond the immediate consumption because they are a lifeline essential for families that are at the level of survival. But in some cases, they can represent a cushion and an added value that would make possible for certain families to make the step forward, to create business, to create jobs, to create something more long-term investment. So we need to preach the verb and continue giving also the instruments, access to financial capacities, creating the technological use, creating the versus also creating at local level, however, the legal and normative and administrative conditions in the receiving countries that would allow also migrants to have access to use these remittance funds in a way that would be unimpeded for the job creation and development purposes. So that's another trend on which we have to continue working. And finally, indeed, which is a little bit the pillar of all of this, to continue promoting the financial education programs for productive use of remittances, and also reacting to some of the other intervention. Indeed, this will imply also reaching out categories of persons that so far had less possibility to acquire this knowledge or the confidence and the technological capacity to make use of this. In some cases, we have already mentioned there are some categories, for example, women and that had or persons in certain parts of the world that had the less possibility to have access to this financial education. I conclude by thanking again all the participants and the IFAD for organized all this. The European Union is proud and happy to support this process and to continue working with all of you in all this process. We believe that the International Day for Family Remittances and the Global Forum on Remittances, Investment and Development remain crucial opportunity to steer the global narrative of remittances toward these future actions. And we really hope that building on a day like this, we will indeed make a step forward in the days and months to come. Many thanks, Heather. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Luciani. Allow me to retort on your comments, very insightful. And I would like to say special thanks on behalf of IFAD, because if we're meeting today, if we have an International Day of Family Remittances, a global forum, and I think the trend that we can witness, all of us around this topic, compares to 10, 15 years ago, it is indeed thanks to the support and the commitment of the European Commission. You, as a European Commission, and your support were a crucial catalyst to IFAD's engagement in this field many years ago, back in 2006, when we started realizing that remittances were really going to rural areas. There was not a rurality aspect regarding remittances, and when this was identified really for the first time, the European Commission started to support, and we can only thank you for this. As you mentioned very well, the priorities that are highlighted now, the example for Africa, for instance, are spot on. Indeed, these flows have the impact that we know, but a lot needs to be done to support them. Capacity, financial literacy, for instance, digital literacy as well, are key instruments in order to enable all the good things that is being said about what remittances can do or can allow families to reach. So again, we want to really thank you for your inspiring words and on this. Next, we had a request from Switzerland, our good friends and partners, which, as you heard as well before, were part of several call to actions that were made. The call to actions with the UK, they're also part of the Remittances Community Task Force. They're behind of so many initiatives surrounding migration and remittances that I cannot think about a better intervention than Switzerland. And for this, we have the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, SDC, and we have Ms. Simone Giger. She's head of the division, the Global Program Migration and Development, Federal Department of Foreign Affairs of Switzerland. So Simone, I would like to give you the floor for your remarks. Thank you so much. I believe you're muted. No? Oh, there's a problem with, I heard a sound, now we do hear you.
Yes, thank you very much, Pedro, for giving me the floor and for the flowers, very much appreciated. I would also like to thank the governments of Guatemala and the Philippines and IFAD for organizing this very important session. And I think if we had all convened a year ago as it was initially intended, few of us really would have bet on the striking robustness and resilience of remittances that we have witnessed in the past few months. We have heard it several times today, the initial projections from the World Bank for March last year were really that remittances would slump by 20% in 2020 alone. At that time, we really saw the flow of remittances under serious jeopardy. There were lockdowns, we had border closures, we had widespread unemployment, no social safety nets for many migrants, and then also the physical access to remittance services was actually quite limited. So we were quite alarmed, I beg to say, by the grave outlook of a serious slump in remittances. And due to that, the governments of Switzerland and the United Kingdom joined forces to rally other governments and important key stakeholders around the call to action, remittances in crisis, how to keep them flowing. The aim of this call was really to raise the awareness about the potentially devastating impact of COVID-19 on those depending on remittances. And we've heard it also several times today. It's millions and millions of families worldwide, but also entire economies. Now, meanwhile, the call to action has really become a unique platform with significant membership and participation of both remittance sending and remittance receiving countries. We have several agencies from the United Nations as part of the call to action, as well as other multilateral organizations, industry partners from the private sector, and civil society. Again, we have heard that the newest remittances data that were published a month ago have somehow laid our fears to rest. They have really underscored the resilience and the counter-cyclical nature of remittances in the face of global economic downturn. There are some explanations as to why we have seen these positive developments, why remittances did not decrease as much as we feared. But I don't think that we have really fully grasped yet all the factors that have contributed to this positive outcome. What we do have, however, and this has been emphasized many times today, is really solid proof, hopefully once and for all, that remittances constitute a key factor that can no longer be neglected or dismissed when we are talking about the achievement of the SDGs. COVID-19 and its economic and social repercussions have really confirmed how important remittances are as a safety net for households and as a reliable stronghold for economies against shocks to the system in times of crisis. Through the call to action, but also other initiatives such as the Remittances Community Task Force that is chaired by IFAD, a momentum has been created on the critical importance of financial inclusion of remittance senders and receivers for the achievement of the SDGs. And I would like to cite Madam Chairwoman, who said that the untold story of remittances is finally on the political agenda, and we really hope that it is there to stay. Now, what the COVID crisis has also done to remittances is that it has highlighted some of the deficiencies and challenges in the existing remittances market. The crisis has really accentuated the potential for digital solutions to disrupt a market that is still largely analogous, and also enhance the role of remittances as a gateway and an entry point for the financial empowerment and inclusion of senders and recipients. Now, given these persisting challenges in the remittance market, but also the opportunities that are presented by the crisis and digitalization, the UK and Switzerland propose to actually continue the call to action beyond its initial purpose of responding to the immediate crisis. So we really feel that a change, of course, is needed to build a stronger business case for remittances, and at the same time to unlock the full potential of remittances for enhancing financial inclusion and achieving the SDGs. And I would like to conclude with an announcement that we are planning an anniversary event. We are celebrating 1 year of the call to action on the 20th of June. 25th of June. I would like to invite everybody who is on this call to join as well. The anniversary event, which will be virtual in nature, will again provide an opportunity to discuss the remittance trends of the past 2 years, identify effective measures taken by different countries on how to respond to the crisis, and also pave the way for the call to action beyond the immediate crisis. With that, I would like to give the word back to you, Pedro, and I thank you all for your attention.
Kirsten, thank you so much for your words, again, for your contribution. And if you allow, I would like to join you as well on some of the things that you've said that we should be very mindful of. The crisis so far was not avoided for millions of migrants. It was confronted. And the reason I would like to specifically say that is that it would be a crime almost to think that, well, even with the crisis, remittances continue, so there's nothing much to do. Therefore, strength of remittance families has been proven, therefore not be a priority. I think the scare that we all saw on the potential impact that 20% of reductions could have on the life of so many was a wake-up call to really look into these flows, because what it also shows is that the vulnerabilities exist. What you mentioned absolutely during the first few months of the crisis, there was a lot of reasons to worry because remittances were not flowing. Remittances were the traditional means of sending it were closed. Migrants, many of them, their jobs were not deemed essential. A lot of issues that it will be almost a crime to be caught for a second time had another crisis similar to this one, unfortunately, happened to occur. And these are the lessons, these are the challenges that need to be addressed now as we are looking more for recovery. The crisis is still there, things are not finished yet. But these indeed, all the call to actions, the remittances community came with a set of measures as well to try to identify. We all came together as one. I'm very privileged to be part of that, as many of you. And we realize that these measures need to be enforced now. I'm very glad, as it was mentioned before, that the G20 has taken a step further than their already commitments on remittances that go beyond the cost of reducing it to less than 5% or 3%, as the SDG indicates. They are really including now the entire equation of remittances, and that is the receiving side of remittances, the issues on the first and last mile. And we really welcome this. The efforts of all countries is not just G20 now, we're G77 plus discussing the full picture of remittances. And these measures, as you mentioned, are aimed at avoiding the potential new crisis to be in the same place where we were in February and March and early April of 2019. So thank you so much for this. I really wanted to support your comment. Next, we have the request from the Dominican Republic, Mrs. Carla Carlson, Economic Affairs of International Cooperation, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who has requested the floor as well. And just I would like to say that for these interventions in Spanish, I don't know if it is going to be in Spanish, but there is unfortunately no French translation. So if you do it in English, yes, but in Spanish,
si habla usted.
Speakers in the audience will need to switch back to English. We're having some technical difficulties in this regard, and we apologize. So thank you for this. Carla, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you, Pedro, for giving me the floor. Don't worry, I'll keep it in English. Excellencies, distinguished representative colleagues, today on the International Day of Family Remittances, we recognize the great resilience and contribution of migrant workers, women and men that help improve the well-being of their families in their country of origin, many under many global difficulties, including now a global pandemic. These cross-border person-to-person payments are vital for many families. Many of these families are struggling due to the pandemic, an economic crisis, and natural disasters made worse by climate change. The Dominican Republic believes that in order to find solutions, we need to find a more tailored approach in measuring and analyzing middle-income countries. Even though our economy has grown between 5 and 7% in the last 10 years, this reality is not visible in some areas. If we continue on this trend, it can mean a great delay for many countries, especially for middle-income countries. Our ability to meet sustainable development goals and to meet the basic demands that families and countries need will be greatly affected. We understand that we must be creative and supportive through digital and financial inclusion and have a more prominent role so that international community does not allow middle-income countries to be left behind. We need to work together to find better solutions and promote better cooperation to foster greater social assistance and economic support. Today, we celebrate the Day of Family Remittances. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this, Carla. I personally know the impact that remittances have in the Dominican Republic. A lot of actions and good practices also came from the private sector initiatives in the country, particularly even more than 10 years ago, having commercial banks getting very interested in the flow beyond just this transaction by understanding that there was a potential to increase their client base by including many of the recipient families and therefore looking at them in a very different way. That has set an example, I believe, for many financial institutions around the world, as history had shown us 40 years even before in many southern countries in Europe, that the migrants and the families receiving money could be the next client base or the next customers for the years to come. And that was proven right. And I think this is also an example in the Caribbean that has been successfully demonstrated. So thank you so much also for your contribution on this. We have still 7 minutes left, but we have still two requests from the floor. I would like to give, therefore, without further ado, the floor to the United Kingdom, Mr. Yemi Oluwakuyide, the remittances lead at the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. It's my pleasure to have it. Yemi, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Pedro, and good afternoon.
And I apologize if I butchered your name. I'm sorry about that. I was taken by surprise. I have a very long name that I always get wrong, so I don't understand. My apologies. Please.
No, that's totally understandable. Thank you very much. It's pronounced Oluwakuyide. It's just pronounced as it's written, but thank you very much. No offense taken. So for us in the UK, we recognize that remittances represent an important and significant source of funds for developing economies. The flows are enormous, and they are much more than the value of traditional foreign capital sources flowing out of the UK and our overseas development assistance. For us, remittances present a major opportunity to build strong, effective partnerships with developing countries and help poor people avoid falling further into poverty. We are committed to facilitating remittances to be spent as productively as possible by making the process cheaper, more accessible, and more secure. We're working with governments and private sector to support necessary regulatory, policy, and product changes required to open the African market to low-value cross-border digital remittances. We're galvanizing resources, building synergies, and leveraging the strengths of like-minded partners and countries. For example, through our call to action on remittances with the government of Switzerland and through the G7 and G20 partners. We're working cross-government to develop an action plan that addresses remittances challenges in the UK. We're looking at issues such as de-risking, illicit financing, illicit finance, transparent pricing, digitization, standard of practice, etc. We're delivering very critical work to increase the availability of digital payment systems through our Harnessing Innovation for Financial Inclusion program. We understand that digital payment systems are a vital part of the ecosystem for improving the affordability and accessibility of remittance flow in line with G20 and SDG targets. We joined the UN and others in calling for governments, the private sector, development organizations, and civil society to promote digital and financial inclusion solutions for remittances and facilitate greater social and economic resilience and inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the action. I just would like also to take the opportunity. There's, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of work based on the call for actions made by several institutions, and including this one. A lot of measures had come out, and many of those have contributed to the financing for development process. Both the Swiss and the UK, as well as the Remittances Community Task Force, have contributed to this process that now is at the G20. And one of the things that many member states have requested, but also stakeholders from the public, from the private sector, is what are the practices? What have we learned through this crisis? What worked? What doesn't? What should we follow? And in light of that, there's several measures that have been proposed. But the first and foremost one that always is taken is the actions of the UK. The UK being the first country that deemed remittances as essential. As you know, many countries did maybe forget to do that. And as a result, many migrants were not able to go and send their remittances as they usually did. In the UK, that changed pretty quickly. And it's something that we would like to commend on that perspective, because it did allow, in fact, many migrants, of course, millions of them, to send money back home, particularly from the UK, which is a major contributor to remittances around the world. So this is a practice that we believe, worst comes to worst, another crisis such as this one would allow us, if implemented, to be prepared and not to be taken by surprise. So I wanted to comment on that. Thank you so much for the contributions and the work. Last but not least, we still have a couple of minutes. I would like to invite our colleague from Indonesia that has requested the floor. So there you go. Ricardo Ruru, can you give you the floor?
Thank you very much, and good morning. And of course, you rightly point out that we also have that other meeting that we have in the plenary. So I will be pretty brief. I would like to thank IFAD, of course, and the Philippines and Guatemala for having this meeting. And first of all, happy International Day for everybody. We recognize that the determination of 200 million migrant workers who regularly send money home has impacted not only 800 million family members, but also the economy in many communities, especially in the developing world. We've heard about the numbers that was mentioned today, and it was also in the report, so I will not go to that. But specifically, I would like to speak on Indonesia. In 2019, Indonesia, we received $11.7 billion US dollars in remittance from 22 countries. This makes up more than 1% of our GDP. However, the number sharply fell by 17.3% in 2020. Not only that, the global pandemic also resulted a large number of migrant workers returning due to layoffs. These numbers provided proof that it is necessary for us, for everybody, to support migrant workers. But not only that, their stories also moved us so that we can take actions. Of course, Indonesia joins the call of the Secretary General for all stakeholders to take steps to reduce remittance transfer costs, provide protection and financial services for migrant workers and their family, particularly in rural areas, as well as promoting financial inclusion for a more secure and stable future. For us, the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, the GCM, offers one key platform for action. Adhering to that call will contribute greatly to our perilous journey in post-conflict, post-pandemic economic recovery. Reducing the transfer costs and other financial burdens would help the grassroots economy and everyday households that are heavily affected by the pandemic to stand on their feet and restore their economic confidence. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. You were short indeed. I know what's going on right now on the site, so it's much appreciated to take the time for joining us. We're right on top of the time. So really, excellencies, colleagues, and most importantly, friends, we wanted to thank you for this this observance, really, where we can come together and wish 1 million people, or recognize for 1 billion people their contributions. Before letting you go, I just wanted to give you a heads up for the continuation of this forum. As you know, this observance is organized within the Global Forum on Remittances, Investment and Development. This is the end of the first day. Tomorrow, we will be in the morning, we will be addressing one of the additional contributions that migrants and diaspora do across the world, what we call diaspora impact investment, and also subsequent entrepreneurship for many of them returning back home. We often mix the two, but in this case, these are the specific investments that diaspora make directly involving their communities. It equals to almost or more than the remittances that they send home, and we will going to be looking at that during the morning to understand what has happened. We know a lot about remittances over the last year. We know very little what happened to diaspora impact investments. So we're going to review on the region, and then we will also discuss more in depth the impact that this can have, particularly to adapt to other crises, some less dramatic, like the COVID, but particularly as climate is changing, how are the diaspora responding to that, but also the remittances that receive that receive this flows. Last, I would like is to invite you for this afternoon session on remittances, and this time we'll be addressing the public sector and the enabling environment in particular surrounding remittances. We will look at a lot of the measures that you've heard today. We talked a lot about the calls and not too much about the content. Well, tomorrow it's going to be the time for that. There's been a lot of questions in the chat about this, some regulatory issues that are important for the private sector to deliver on this agenda, to deliver on these services for millions of people. Well, that is going to be addressed tomorrow, and to understand how this could be curbed towards this financial inclusion. On the costs, 99% of the people, when they heard about remittance costs, they don't think that there's other costs. It's not just the one that is paid for by the sender or extracted from the recipient. There's an opportunity cost. We will be addressing this during this session. And I will just want to say that all these sessions are just the first round of several discussions, virtual discussions that we'll have. And we hope that during the next observance next year, that we will be able to have this all in person in New York if everything goes well. So only with 5 minutes over the time, I would like to thank everyone for their participation. Of course, it's been a privilege for IFAD to support the government of Guatemala and the Philippines in this observance, and we wish you all a very good evening, continuation of the afternoon and of the day for those that are in New York. So thank you very much.